Good afternoon, everyone. Your Sunday weather briefing for this May 13th finds that there are no major changes in my forecast versus what I presented from back on Friday. It's still a fairly active and stormy weather pattern for the Corn Belt for the next 2 weeks. Very difficult to find days in which there will not be at least a little rain falling somewhere in the region. It's not a wet forecast for the Mid-South for the next 2 weeks, and in fact, it will be completely dry there through Tuesday. Contrast that with some big rains developing earlier this week in the southeast as some tropical moisture starts to flood into that area. For the hard red winter wheat belt, very similar forecast to what we talked about late last week. Almost a daily threat of rainfall somewhere in the hard red winter wheat belt for at least the next week. Most spots eventually picking up some decent or significant totals. We're not looking at a lot of extreme heat for most of the region for tomorrow through Wednesday. Will be some heat though to finish off the week before it is cooler again for the weekend. Not an especially wet pattern in the northern plains for the next week. Some rains though in week 2, but never really an exceptionally wet pattern there for the entire 2 week forecast. Rainfall and temperature maps for this Sunday afternoon. First of all, I want to note that we are still looking at some pretty big heat in the near term, some much above normal temperatures for the southern portion of the Corn Belt and into the Mid-South. A lot of that heat is occurring for this Sunday and will again occur in those areas for tomorrow before they moderate somewhat. Temperature contrast still indicated for the 6 to 10 day period with some cool conditions in the central plains, contrasting with some warm conditions over southeastern portions of the nation before a bigger portion of the nation goes to above normal temperatures in the 11 to 15 day period. And you can see the active weather pattern for the next 2 weeks with extensive areas of normal and above normal rainfall for a big portion of the middle of the country for both the 6 to 10 and 11 to 15 day time frames. QPF discussion. This is the QPF map from late this afternoon on this Sunday. In general, I think that the map is probably overstating the coverage of the rain that is going to be falling in this period. Basically, they have blanket coverage of half to 1 inch plus rains across the Plain States, Corn Belt, and into the southeast. I'm not going to have any disagreement with that for Ohio and points east and south of there, as there are going to be big rains in that areas. But to the west of there, certainly there are going to be a lot of half to 1 inch rainfall amounts, and locally even heavier than that. But I do believe that the coverage of rain that is illustrated by this map is probably not going to be quite as good. For the day 6 to 7 day time frame, models are not in the best of agreement that I've ever seen. I like where this model is showing the best rainfall chances to occur. In general, the coverage in this time frame will probably be less than is illustrated, but amounts maybe even better than shown. As far as look at the radar at late afternoon on this Sunday, we do have an area of thunderstorms that has crossed the Mississippi River in the Corn Belt on this Sunday afternoon, and that will continue to be moving eastward during the evening hours throughout a portion of the eastern Corn Belt. It's pretty quiet in the western Corn Belt and the plains, but you can see that there are some thunderstorms popping up at this time in some portions of the hard red winter wheat belt. A section of that area is under a severe thunderstorm watch at this time, so what I think we're going to be seeing is increased coverage of thunderstorm activity in the southern plains from now through the evening hours, but then it will be dying off as we get in towards the very late evening and as we head especially towards midnight. At that same time, though, for later on this evening and during the overnight hours, look for some fairly extensive shower and thunderstorm activity developing in the western Corn Belt, so that by the time we get to tomorrow morning, this should be 5 o'clock in the morning tomorrow, a fairly decent area of shower and thunderstorm activity is likely going to be occurring at that time in a decent portion of the Corn Belt. This is a prediction of what the radar is going to be looking like at, again, around 5 o'clock tomorrow morning by one of the short-range high-resolution models. The rain at that time is all due to a trough of low pressure that is still indicated over western portions of the nation. That's valid as of 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. That particular trough is going to be weakening over time, but it is going to be replaced by yet another one. The map on the right is 500 millibar heights as of 7 o'clock in the morning on Friday, and again by that time we do see that another trough of low pressure has replaced the first in western portion of the nation, which would keep a big portion of the middle of the country still in an active weather pattern at that time. 5-day rainfall amounts will actually, this be total rainfall amounts, I should say, until late in the day on this coming Friday, until about 7 p.m. on this Friday. And you can see the active weather pattern indicated in the middle of the country with fairly extensive rains from the European model suggested there on the left, a GFS model on the right. Certainly some differences on those two models on exact amounts and exact coverage. But one thing I do want to point out, let's check out northern portions of Michigan, central and northern portions of Wisconsin. far northern Iowa into extreme southeastern South Dakota, and a big portion of Minnesota on both models. Notice how both models are in some good agreement that that particular portion of the Corn Belt is not a favorite area for big rainfall amounts from now through late in the day on Friday. It's not going to be completely dry in those areas, and maybe that's exactly what those areas need right now is completely dry weather. But at the very least, an area of the Corn Belt that is very wet right now and really needs some to miss some of these rainfall events to get some planters in the field eventually. It is an area that both the GFS and on European models are in good agreement right now that for today through late in the day on Friday, that is not the favorite area for rainfall in the Corn Belt. The biggest rains from now through late in Friday should be to the south of that area. As far as total 2-week rainfall amounts are concerned, again, an active and stormy weather pattern going to be seen in a big part of that period in a big portion of the nation's midsection, and from the various models, the GFS ensemble in the upper left, Canadian ensemble in the middle top, GFS operational model in the upper right, and the European ensemble in the bottom right, all of them showing extensive areas of rainfall across a sizable portion of the middle of the country. They've all got their differences on exactly how much the rain is going to be falling and exactly who's going to get the bigger amounts, but it's a situation where I think that at least in the Corn Belt a lot of 1.5 to 3.5 inch rainfall amounts can fall. Everyone has a chance for that, but as usual, not everyone is actually going to be getting that much. Timing, bad luck, and bad circumstances are going to be meaning that some areas just do not get that type of rain. But again, for the most part, everyone in the Corn Belt has a chance for 1.5 to 3.5 inches of rainfall during the next 2 weeks. Wouldn't be surprising at all to see some locally heavier amounts than that. For the hard red winter wheat belt, you can see there as well, all models in agreement that there are going to be some rainfall chances there for at least the next week, if not 10 days, before rainfall chances probably do start to go downhill again in the hard red belt during the 11 to 15 day time frame. I would think that for the next week to 10 days, the bulk of the hard red belt seeing at least some 1/2 to 1.5 inch rainfall amounts. Some spots again probably getting missed just due to bad luck or circumstances. Other spots though that happen to get under a stronger or severe thunderstorm more than once could easily see more than 2 inches of rainfall in the hard red belt. So at least they have chances for the next 10 days in that area before rainfall chances probably go downhill again in the 11 to 15 day time frame. Temperature-wise, a warm day again on this Sunday in southeastern portions of the southern plains, the southern Corn Belt, and into the mid-south with a lot of 85 to 95 degree highs. We'll see another day of that type of heat again for tomorrow, a lot of 85 to 95 degree highs. Those areas will then see temperatures moderate for Tuesday through Thursday or Friday, but then heat returns to those areas. This is the European model's high temperature map as we get towards Saturday. Again, notice an extensive area of 85 to 95 degree highs will once again at that time in the southern Corn Belt, mid-south, and into the southern plains. Our temperature contrast is back by that time as well. Notice how those 85 to 95 degree highs contrast with temperatures in the 70s, 60s, or even 50s just to the northwest of there. And again, that is for this coming Saturday. Longer term, once we do see a little bit cooler weather move into portions of the plains, both north and south, and into the western and northwestern Corn Belt for the end of this week through about Monday, warmth is going to return. This is by the day 11 time frame from the various models. So for bulk of the 11 to 15 day period, pretty extensive area of above normal temperature suggested by all of the models for the bulk of the 11 to 15 day time frame. So other than some modest cooling in especially portions of the central and northern plains, western and northwestern Corn Belt for around the May 19th through 22nd time frame, a lot of above normal temperatures in the 2-week forecast for a lot of the nation. Internationally, real briefly here for this afternoon, near and below normal rainfall for the next 2 weeks in safrinha corn areas of Brazil. You can see that the driest conditions there in northern growing areas where a lot of eastern Mato Grosso, Goiás, and nearby areas seeing under a 1/2 inch of rainfall for the next 2 weeks. Still a situation where your better rains are going to be falling to the south of there, especially Wednesday through about Saturday of this week is going to be the favored time frame for rainfall in Mato Grosso do Sul and Paraná. In Europe, this is looking at percent of normal rainfall in Europe and the former Soviet Union winter grain areas for the next 2 weeks. It's not the wettest pattern that I've ever seen, but you can the maps are suggesting that for the wintergreen areas of the former Soviet Union, near to perhaps a little bit above normal rainfall there for the next 2 weeks. Over in Europe, the biggest rains with respect to normal anyway during the next 2 weeks going to be favoring the east versus the west. Canadian prairies, certainly not a wet forecast there. This is looking at 10-day rainfall totals from the European model this afternoon. Note the minimal amounts of rain that are going to be falling some portions of especially Saskatchewan and Manitoba for the next 10 days, seeing extremely meager rains in that time frame. Especially Manitoba would really like to see some better rains at this time. Strictly a dry forecast for the winter wheat areas of Australia for the next 2 weeks, well below normal rainfall all across that area. A big portion of the growing area seeing nothing at all in Australia for the next 10 days, if not longer than that. That's what I have for this Sunday afternoon. Everyone have themselves a great rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow morning.